The gangster genre has always been more of a nebulous concept than other genres like horror or comedy. Those genres are simpler. Horror makes you scared. Comedy makes you laugh. But the gangster genre doesn't aim to evoke such a simple feeling from its audience. The gangster genre is defined more by its subject matter, namely gangsters. To be part of the gangster genre is to tell a story about some sort of enterprise that's not exactly above board when it comes to the law. That's why the gangster genre conventionally fits so well into the genre of order. The contested space is wherever the illegal actions are taking place, with the perceived utopia as the goal being freedom from punishment and power over one's enemies. Often in gangster films, this is achieved through violent and irreversible conflict. Also, the gangster genre has always been one that is male-dominated. Martha Nochimson describes the gangster genre as hyper-masculine fare, understood to be popular because of its explosive virility and its close connection to reality. But where did this tradition of media get its start? Most would point to the Warner Brothers gangster films of the 1930s, such as Little Caesar or The Public Enemy, which capitalized on the new addition of sound to capture the lascivious language and rapid-fire rapport of a Thompson that was becoming emblematic of the gangster style. But these were not the first gangster films. Gangster films, or underworld films as they were called at the time, were being made as far back as 1910. These movies were part of a production cycle, a trend in movie production that favors whatever type of film is selling best at the time. Many film scholars attribute the creation of genres to these cycles, and the gangster genre is no exception. In two phases, the gangster films made from 1910 to roughly 1929 and the introduction of sound were part of the gangster regeneration cycle, so named because many of the films contain story elements that involved the main criminal character being morally regenerated by a companion character, usually a female co-star. But this goes even deeper. The gangster regeneration cycle drew from the slum plays and salvation stories of stage melodrama, a set of narrative formulas and thematic concerns that reflected the influence of progressive ideology. At the root of the gangster genre are poverty, family, the belief that a brighter future is there for the taking, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to achieve that. Narcos definitely exemplifies these cornerstone tenets. The main character, the real-life drug lord Pablo Escobar, is a man from humble beginnings, born in Rio Negro near Medellin, Colombia. He is given no advantages in life, and certainly no help from the oligarchical government. But he decides that he wants power and wealth and opportunity, and he acquires what he wants and provides for his family first through smuggling contraband, and later by manufacturing, transporting, and selling cocaine. He even tells his mother that one day he will be president of Colombia. Escobar did go on to become a member of the Colombian legislature for a short time. Pablo is one in a long lineage of male anti-heroes in the gangster genre. Michael Corleone, Tony Soprano, Walter White, men that are morally in the weeds but still abide by some sort of ethics code and have a goal and motivation that an audience can sympathize with. The show also provides a flip side of the coin in the narrator, DEA agent Steve Murphy, who represents both law and morality and a certain American aloofness. There are many contested spaces to cite as examples: Bogota, Medellin, the drug labs in the jungle, the trade routes that Pablo controls. In the case of Bogota and Medellin, these add to the gangster genre tradition of an urban setting. In American gangster films, the subjects are usually immigrants or descendants of immigrants whose stories occur entirely inside the cities in which they live. Not so for Pablo, as he travels across jungle, cityscape, and many smuggling routes to maintain control of his enterprise. One hallmark that cannot be forgotten when discussing the gangster genre is the presence of guns. Guns are the first and most basic way that gangsters get what they want, by hurting or killing anyone in their way. Guns do play an important part in Narcos, though they are never the focus. The drugs are always at center stage, and any deaths that occur from the resulting conflict are seen as collateral damage in Pablo's mind. The guns are never romanticized as anything more than tools, merely a means to get the job done, applied effectively and often. This is one way in which Narcos defies certain conventions in the gangster genre. Guns also play a key and arguably more major part in Grand Theft Auto 4. One of the main mechanics in the game is the use of guns to kill enemies, and as the name would suggest, steal cars in order to move quickly around Liberty City, Rockstar's thinly veiled parody of New York City, GTA's own classic urban gangster playground. This also serves as the contested space, with the player constantly having to lose tailing cop cars or trigger-happy thugs in LC's maze of streets. The player controls Nico Bellic, a former soldier from Eastern Europe that has come to America at the behest of his cousin Roman. As I mentioned before, the immigrant narrative is a large part of gangster media, and Nico Bellic's character could be seen as the spiritual descendant of another European immigrant to New York, Vito Corleone. In Nico's connection to his cousin, we see an example of the importance of family in this genre. An even better example would be the McCrearys, an old Irish mob family whose power has waned but allies itself with Nico over the course of the game. Nico and Roman also show this same desire for a better life, with Roman constantly referring to how they will soon be living it up in a high-rise condo with a hot tub and beautiful women, and Nico being somewhat of a bumbling, hopeless romantic. While these two texts appear in vastly different formats, a majority of what makes them part of the gangster genre remains the same. They are both male-dominated, and these male main characters are anti-heroic, doing traditionally bad things that we can still sympathize with because of the context and circumstances. They both contain narratives of preserving and protecting family, and of a main character striving to achieve their idealized utopian vision of their life. One of the key differences is that Narcos can focus on the points of view of different characters more easily, telling the story primarily through the narration of Steve Murphy, but putting us in the shoes of Pablo himself whenever he's on screen. In GTA, the player is restricted to being Nico for the duration of the story, but is able to interact with many different characters whenever they want, due to the free roam, open world nature of the game. Speaking of interacting, that's another thing that sets GTA apart from Narcos and even from other games, the level of interactivity that the game affords the player. Wolf defines interactivity as being user participation, in which the player's choices determine the course of the game. Throughout the course of GTA, the player is able to do activities at will, completing them in whatever order they choose, to an extent. This means that a player could potentially defy the conventions of the gangster genre entirely, and choose to have Nico only go on dates with Michelle or to go play darts and eat Cluckenbell. This is defined as the player's agency. The player's ability to engage in secondary activities like side quests and recreational activities such as sports and dating heightens the immersion of the game as it attempts to emulate real life. The player is also able to choose whether or not to execute some of the targets Nico is tasked with assassinating, and while this has little to no effect on further gameplay, it does allow players to make choices dealing with morality in the game world. The biggest effect the player has on the outcome of the game is in the climax of the plot, where the player can choose to either strike a deal with an enemy which results in one character death, or choose to betray the enemy for revenge, which results in a different character death. Both of these texts fit fairly well into the conventions of their genre, but use them in unique and interesting ways. Narcos uses the classic anti-hero character model paired with the dogged and moral lawman to tell the real-life story of the South American cocaine trade, which was previously something that was not a part of the gangster lexicon at this level of exposure. GTA uses the conventions of many different parts of the genre and throws them in together to create a buffet of gangster experiences ripe for the player's picking. Both of these texts are new and interesting additions to the gangster genre, and could very well become classics in their own right.